And although we talk about reinventing the human, and I myself avoid somewhat the word ecology because it's kind of a hard word and does not have the proper warmth or the proper resonance that a person might wish. I frequently use the term the life community for what a person might at times call ecology. Or the environmental issue. The ecologists, and I myself am rather sensitive to the point of the difference between the environmentalists and the ecologists. The environmentalists are basically anthropocentric. The ecologist is clearly biocentric in the approach. So I thought, first of all, that I would mention that as we go about our work, we do need to be very clear of where we stand at the present time. Now, in many colleges, the courses in ecology have dropped in attendance in recent years, so that a certain phase of this development has led to certain adjustments and so forth. Many things have been accomplished, and yet there is a certain testing of the approach that we are presenting. Now, one of the things that's most important, there was the issue raised about the economics. I have been concerned recently with this issue in terms of the entrepreneur. Certainly the industrial corporation entrepreneur. It's said that we're moving from a managerial society to an entrepreneurial society. And there is a new interest in the great leaders of the great cooperative structures. We have books like this, Search for Excellence, Passion for Excellence, the new leadership training programs, something like 65,000 masters in business administration come out every year. So that these people are being trained for initiative in the business world. And the business world has had a renewal. There's a type of euphoria in certain phases of the business world, guided by archetypal figures like Lee Iacocca or the founder of IBM and some of the great corporations that have come into being in the last few years. So that this sensitivity or this interest has arisen in the new stage of the cooperative enterprise. So I've been lecturing recently on the entrepreneur and the ecologist. Meaning by the entrepreneur, not the basic idea of someone undertaking a limited or a more a less exploitative business venture, but the real industrial entrepreneur. What is happening now is the creation of what I would call a type of spirituality, a business or cooperative spirituality. The great entrepreneurs are the people, and these were identified in this book, Search for Excellence, which was followed by someone named Peters and also somebody named Waterman. They then did a book called Passion for Excellence. And they outlined in this process, or when they went about their work, what they did in the Search for Excellence is to interview something like 60 or 70 of the most outstanding people, the archetypal figures in American business. in the cooperative world and to identify what are the characteristics of these people whereby they're able to do so much. And their discovery was that their genius was largely in creating a cooperative spirit, a culture, a myth, a faith, a family feeling, an allegiance, a personal fulfillment, everything that we use in our general traditions of spirituality and religion. Some of them even use the word religious dedication. It's that evocation in the constitution of a certain feeling. Now, you'll find families that when one of the children goes to college and graduates and get a position with IBM, well, that's like being saved. You know, that's like, that's like entered into the company of the blessed. You have a great future, so that you're part of the family. You're going somewhere. You are somebody, and so forth. And then also places. I come from North Carolina, a third world state. I generally characterize it, but the city I belonged to, Greensboro, it was a very small place when I was there. I remember when it was 12,000 people. Now it's got 250,000 people. But they feel so honored when a business comes. Now this is widespread. Almost everywhere on the North American continent, places that are trying to develop to get a corporation to consider coming there, establishing a headquarters. They bid for this. They offer tax incentives. They offer them a great deal. Governors of states outdo themselves in going to Japan. The governor of North Carolina goes to Japan every month or so to try to get the Japanese to put heavy industry into North Carolina. And they put up this wonderful, so everybody thinks, Triangle Research Center. Triangle Park, yeah, where they have Duke University, University of North Carolina, and State University.
And the National Institute for Environmental Health.
Yeah, that's right. That's the Institute of Environmental.
And that was a big plump.
That was, yeah.
Federal money down there.
Oh, yeah, and all of this, and is just, we're going places, and they're building the roads. They're building an airport there. It's probably twice as big as Kennedy Airport or Toronto Airport. And for 30 miles, they've scraped between certain parts of Raleigh and Chapel Hill now, originally a very beautiful area in Chapel Hill. They've scraped bare about 30 miles, no vegetation at all, hardly. In the Triangle Park, they just scraped off, thousands of acres, apparently. I've just gone through it a couple of times. And then they, of course, they do a little landscaping, put some trees around, make it look nice. But you wouldn't believe development. I've seen development projects up here, but in Raleigh, in places you can drive for literally miles and miles around Raleigh and putting up these homes, these development projects, and for these would be $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 homes with fair amount of land, and all for the young entrepreneurs or the young business people, executives that are moving in. You wonder, are there that many in the world? But we got them all in North Carolina now. But the idea is that this is a project. Now, how many of you know what the underline or the motto of the Wall Street Journal is? Never heard of it. You've heard of the New York Times. What's the underline? Yeah, all the news is there. But the daily diary of the American dream. Wall Street Journal, the daily diary of the American dream. So they are conscious of the dream in their advertising, and I consider the advertising industry totally hysterical in its volume and its jazzed up situation. McDonald's ad now is all jazzed up, and it's an exciting thing, almost as exciting as last night, maybe. But they are into this. All the body is into it. You're into the game there. So that so I got some difficulty, and I got some not too favorable readback from my use of the word entrepreneur and the ecologists, and so I'm a little bit hesitant to pursue that, because they felt that entrepreneur was not inherently that derogatory as I was making it, or that we should leave space for some type of an entrepreneurial enterprise. Maybe this has turned into entrepreneurial enterprise. But so I did it. What I wanted to do is to delineate the forces for the reinventing of the human and the difficulty, what I would call the resistance element, or the opaque or the dark element that we confront. And so, but we have to remember that if they are opaque to us, we are opaque to them. And so that we have a relationship of what I call the rising conflict. Because although there is a certain coming together of minds, it's an intensification, because the people have a stupendous stake in this. And if the recreation process is really going to meet this is fantastic. I hesitate to again to go into delineate the challenge that we face, but we do need to identify the two dreams. Now, this is a dream that's turned into a nightmare, of course, the dream of progress. And it's rooted, of course, in the whole drive of the apocalyptic vision. This is a religious thing that we're confronting. It's the whole biblical tradition channeled into a destructive enterprise. That's why it couldn't have arisen anywhere else than out of a biblical tradition. And that's the dark side. The Bible is the most dangerous document in the world. Well, let's just send that to the Pope. The Bible is the most dangerous document in the world. Now, this, that's all. Because it has that enormous historical, in a sense of historical inevitability of this day of the Lord, this day when justice would be done, when there'd be peace, and the trees would blossom 12 months out of a year, and there would be this abundance and tranquility, and it sounds like a consumer society, but the consumer society is what you would call the parody of this process. Now, what we're into in this industrial process, we're into a parody type thing, or a subverted version of perhaps, certainly among the noblest visions of the human. It's a dream vision that's presented to Christians through the apocalyptic visions that begin with Daniel and his projection of the 4 ages that would culminate in the great period of the kingdom. And it's a journey to the promised land. And the journey to the promised land is the dominant metaphor of the whole Bible. It's the dominant metaphor of the Christian world. It's the journey to the Holy Land. It's that movement toward this fulfillment, to the reign of God, to the kingdom of heaven. All of these words are, they have a dream quality about them, but it's to be the difficulty. You have to understand the difference between, and it's very important that you're not confused, utopia, Arcadia, a paradise, and the millennium. The Bible promises the millennium. It's not exactly paradise, and it's not a utopia, and it's not Arcadia. What is Arcadia? Arcadia comes from the word that means the original. That is going back to peaceful serenity, pastoral type existence. That's Arcadia. The paradise has the qualities of some earthly state about it. Utopia is never meant to be fulfilled. Utopia is meant to be a model like St. Thomas More's Utopia. It's one of the first, maybe the first certainly of the modern books, maybe it was the first. The use of the word that way. He set up a model. It was not meant to be fulfilled, but it was something to guide the course of human affairs. Now, but millennium is that 1,000 years infrahistorical within the historical process that was to be achieved inevitably through historical sequence of transformations. That's why Marxism is totally biblical. Now this, and it's why being able to deal with this is so important, because when this shifted from a spiritual fulfillment by divine grace and by heavenly providence, when it was not achieved around the 16th century, humans decided through science and technology, and beginning with Francis Bacon, to achieve it by human effort and by control of the natural world. Since it did not descend from heaven, and particularly after the Black Death, when the earth was seen as a destructive place, then religion drifted off into salvific processes, and the scientific, technological world seized hold of the idea, well, let's try to control the threatening aspect of the natural world by understanding it, controlling it, and using it. So that but under the millennial drive, but then that the whole millennial drive shifted into this sense of historical progress in a material vein, based on the earth as a collection of resources. So that's the dream. It was the millennial dream shifted into a type of material fulfillment. And we have succeeded to a large extent in establishing a type of a world that people never dreamed of before. We can do things, we can control the planet and so forth, but we've come to a certain terminus of it, but people can't even see that already that is self-destructing, a self-destruct process. So, but still it's a driving dream. Still it's constantly reinvigorated. Still we have this euphoria. Still we have 65,000 MBAs coming out every year determined to achieve that. And in their writings, in their studies, and if you examine their books, and I examined 30 or some of them recently, not a single word of reference to the natural world and any responsibility for it, just the assumption that it was there to be exploited, and that the business training was to teach them how to establish and guide human organizations to a profitable enterprise, doing what? Doing whatever, as long as the profit is there. So, based on that, what I've done, and assuming all this, it's one of the reasons why we cannot deal with this except at least by a comparable type religious understanding, by a comparable type of energy. We can't beat it on its own game, because we would lose the very cause that we are fighting or that we are trying to achieve. That is the difficulty. And it's why we have to remain vulnerable in many ways while we act, as it were, at the most basic level of things, and begin a creation of a new order of things in language. That's why the language is so important. You can see how this is using language now, and to use all these means that are available to us in language, and particularly in food growing, in providing food. Now, here's the problem. The industrial society I described sometime as a bubble, and outside the bubble there is no life. In other words, if you're educating, if you have children, and you want them to have some kind of survival, they have to be trained to have some kind of position inside the bubble. And that's the difficulty of it right now. There's no life outside the bubble. But the bubble itself, of course, is disintegrating, although at the present time it has experiencing a certain fluorescence, manufacturing up, and all of that. Actually, there's a glut of everything on the planet now. Even third world countries have gluts, and there's a glut of coffee, there's a glut of copra, there's a glut of just about everything. But there's just total imbalance. That's about how it functions, and people have lost their control of their food supply and their basic needs because they have been drawn into this enormous marketing economy where that's based on mass productive processes and on money exchange, rather than an economy that's based on subsistence agriculture and a community sustainability, small community sustainability. Now, in going back to this, and under the guidance of people like Robert Rodale, and the Rodale Center is one of the geniuses in being able to articulate how this is done, then we are we're just beginning to be able to do this, and that's the importance of that coming second bioregional Congress, because we're beginning to see that we've got to see where we are. And that's why, just to tell you a small story, about some years ago when I was going from Chicago to Ann Arbor, and I was reading this piece about this workman in the steel mill down in the Youngstown Valley, where they have these miles of steel mills. They've been out of operation, or they were out of operation at that time for over a year. And this one man had been out of work for 6 months. He was being interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter had written up for the paper. The man said, "What's happened? Where can we go? What can I do? What does it mean?" And obviously, the worker had lost his job. He wasn't getting money, and he had no idea what to do. Our idea now is to get a job, make money, with money buy everything. That's unacceptable as a sustainable way of human survival. Now but there was land, there was community, there was skills, and there's a question of humans beginning to reorganize themselves in relationship to the basic essentials of life, using basic skills, and activating a new process. Now, it's just with those preliminary things, I would like to briefly